Back here on Fantasy Pros Fantasy Fest 2024. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in with us. We are midway through hour 3, so we're about halfway through, actually. I think we're exactly halfway through, if my math is right. So I appreciate everybody sticking around in the first half of today's stream, and everybody who plans to stick around for the whole show. You are the real heroes here, so we appreciate you tuning in. We are bringing on a guest here, Billy Muzio. Billy, I think we did a Fantasy Fest segment last year with the same group of the three of us. Am I remembering that correctly? Do you remember?
Sit down, talk football. I think it was the first time you and I podcast together as well. So, now we're seasoned vets together. Let's rock and roll.
We're making it an annual thing, which is definitely fun because I had a great time chatting with you last year. Fitz, let's dive right in. We're talking running back rankings and tiers, and I kind of paused the last segment on this because we were talking about Christian McCaffrey, who, of course, is right at the top of these tiers. And, I'm not sure how much this might change with continued kind of injury updates in either direction with CMC. As of right now, tier 1 is CMC and RB1, Bijan Robinson RB2, Breece Hall RB3. So, Fitz, what is your approach with Christian McCaffrey right now if you had to draft tonight?
Take him 101. And we'll see if Billy disagrees. I mean, based on the players behind Billy on that mural, I'm guessing we might not have a lot of disagreement on this one. But yeah, I mean, I'm not too worried about the calf strain. Apparently he was running and cutting in practice just like even a week ago, I think. So I'm not too worried about it. And I don't believe in curses. I know he has had a lot of work lately, but people used to be terrified after he missed substantial parts of 2 straight seasons. But now he's given us 2 pretty healthy seasons so far. Like he's been pretty resilient the last couple of years. So I'm not, panicky over this little minor injury in training camp.
He's still at the top for you too, Billy?
Yeah, he's at the top for me. This is kind of a no-brainer pick, and I think there's a lot of variables still. We still have some uncertainty here for the team. There's a lot of potential targets that could be distributed still, but I do really like Chris McCaffrey. This is a no-brainer pick for me as well. I think you could make an argument for CeeDee Lamb to get mixed in there as well, just to have some ownership, but I do think that Christian McCaffrey is one of those guys that you just pull the trigger on if you have the 101 and you lock in yourself some major opportunity share and someone is going to be in one of the best offenses of football with, a chance to score on any given play. So it's a no-brainer for me. Christian McCaffrey, I think the injury right now, they're just playing it safe. This is not somebody they want to roll out to the season injured on week 1. They're going to want to, keep him fresh going into the season, and they're going to just, treat him very delicately with kid gloves all the way until then.
I don't want to spend too much time on tier 1, but before we move off, Billy, I do want to ask your opinion. I brought this up to Fitz in the last segment. Bijan versus Breece, a very kind of popular debate in fantasy circles this season. Do you have a preference yourself? Or I've been saying for me, it's not even 51-49. It's 50.5, 49.5. That's how close it is for me. Do you have a side either way?
Yeah, I have a slight lean with Breece Hall. I mean, but this is a tier that's separated for me by less than 1.5 fantasy points. I got Christian McCaffrey pretty far ahead of both these guys. And then I have, Derrick Henry and the next tier there slightly behind them. So it just breaks down to preference. And I like the Breece Hall's involvement in the passing game a little bit more, less touch competition. This is an offense that is also down weapons right now with injuries. And so I think that we're going to see Breece Hall continue to see, a major amount of opportunities inside of the passing game. And that's not going to be slowing down. I mean, this is a player last year who saw 95 targets, number 1 in the league at the position. And I think that we're looking at a similar usage here in 2024. So I like Hall slightly there. Tyler Algier is a good back in Atlanta, and I don't think he's just going to disappear despite the coaching changes. And I think that he's going to remain involved in the offense. And as much as we would like to see Bijan Robinson get, 60 to 70% of the workload, I just don't think it's going to happen.
Quickly, Fitz, last question on this tier. By what pick should all 3 of these guys be gone? Is it the top 3? Is it the top 4? Is it the top 8? What pick at that point, these guys should not be on the board anymore?
If you have to start 3 wide receivers every week, I think these guys should be gone by about 7 overall. But if you only have to start 2 wide receivers every week, I think these guys should probably go 1, 2, 3, and should be off the board no later. By pick 5, all 3 should be gone.
It looks like you agree, Billy.
Pat's a sharp man. That's exactly the number I was going to say. Pick 5 to 8, depending upon the format. So love it, Pat.
Awesome. All right, let's get into tier 2 here. Just to quickly read the names. It's Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne. I want to ask about Jahmyr Gibbs because, Fitz, we just talked about Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley in the last segment. Those guys are on either end of Gibbs in the rankings at RB5. So, Fitz, starting with you, what is your approach with Gibbs this year? Are you getting him a lot in the early second round? Is he somebody that you're avoiding that area? I know that you have been concerned about David Montgomery in the past.
Yeah, I'm not getting him at all. And I'll be interested to hear what Billy says about this because Billy is such a great ranker. Like when I have my own lineup debates, Billy's rankings are among the first I'll go to try to break ties for me. So, yeah, I mean, I do have Gibbs ranked running back 5, but I'm a little concerned that his workload is not going to justify a late first round pick. So last year, we got off to that slow start where David Montgomery was getting more work than the Gibbs investors wanted to see. Then Montgomery gets hurt and Gibbs goes ballistic. But then Montgomery is back in week 10. And from that point on through the rest of the season, including the playoffs, Jahmyr Gibbs averaged 11.3 carries and 2.9 catches a game. So a little over 14 touches a game. That's basically the same workload that Devon Achane had. Yet people are balking at taking Achane at the round 2, round 3 turn, but seem to have no problem with Gibbs at that round 1, round 2 turn. And I think there's maybe less of a gap between those two than is commonly perceived.
Billy, what do you make of Gibbs?
I'm in the same boat here with Pat, and I think it's more about the ADP than is the player. I think that the player is fantastic, and I think he's got every opportunity to succeed, but he's got a lot of touch competition, and he's playing it with David Montgomery, and this is an offense that we saw feed the target distribution through Amon-Ra St. Brown as well as Laporta, and yes, there's targets available for grab, but I just think that we're going to see more of a dual-headed running back approach. It worked last year. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think that they're going to continue to lean on both these backs. We've also seen Gibbs already start to kind of get beat up at times. We're already seeing it now in the preseason. And it's not somebody they're going to, continue to just, give 200 plus touches to. And I think that he's going to make his money in the passing game. And I do think that though he's probably the third option at best on any given week, maybe fourth at time from time. And it's at the cost at ADP currently, I'm choosing other options. Now, if you're, a volume drafter and you're playing in multiple leagues, you have to mix in some exposure. But if I'm in a home league and I got 1 or 2 or 3 drafts, I'm probably passing on them, letting somebody else take it. And I'll gladly take a running back at a cheaper cost much later in the draft who has more upside possibly, or just as much.
Billy, I want to ask before we get out of this tier about Derrick Henry. He's somebody that I feel like I'm just hyping up more and more every single show. Like as I sat down to do my rankings, like I'm just like I want to have him in my top 5. I just want to be above consensus on him. He's currently RB8. I'm just expecting him to score like 15 touchdowns if he stays healthy, which is not a guarantee. He is a 30-year-old running back, but I'm expecting a really big season from Derrick Henry. So what are you doing with Henry in drafts this year?
I have him at RB4, and I have
him. Oh, yes. Thank you. I love hearing that.
I have him actually closer to Bijan than people would probably like, and I think there's a real argument to be made to take him ahead of Bijan.
I'd love to hear that
this season. So I understand the trepidation. I mean, he's 30 years old, but he's still performing. I mean, last year he averaged 4.2 yards per carry on 12 touchdowns. Now he's in an RPO, run-friendly system where Gus Edwards averaged over 5 yards per carry throughout his career. And I mean, let's face it, Derrick Henry's a far superior back than Gus Edwards. And this is, I think, some magic waiting to happen. Henry last year in a less of an offense had 16 runs over 15 yards, what we call, breakaway run rate over at Player Profiler. And he still averaged over 7 defenders in the box, still managed to have, almost 1,200 rushing yards, second most in the league. And, like I said earlier, 12 touchdowns, which is the 6th most in the league. And I'm expecting this box to get lighter in this RPO system. And I'm expecting Henry to take full advantage of the defenses here with keeping teams honest. And I honestly think that Derrick Henry should be an early round 2 pick, if not late round 1 pick, given his new current scheme and his abilities. So I'm all in on Derrick Henry this year.
I love that you agree with me. That makes me feel so much better about my stance on Henry. I've shared this stat on the show before, but for those who, since it's kind of the big fantasy fest, if you're listening for the first time this offseason to Fantasy Pros, I want to share the stat again. Lamar Jackson last year inside the 20 had the 5th most fantasy points of any quarterback. Inside the 10, he had the 5th most fantasy points of any quarterback. Inside the 5, he had the 25th most fantasy points of any quarterback. When they get inside the 5, they are handing it off, and there's nobody better to hand it off to than Derrick Henry. Again, if he is healthy, I think he's scoring 15 touchdowns. Like, not a guarantee, he's a running back, whatever. If he's healthy, there's no way he's under a dozen touchdowns.
Like, I mean, Gus Edwards had 13 touchdowns in this offense last season. And I mean, Henry is bigger, better, faster, stronger. This is the guy that's they're just going to hand it off every single time to him. We are not going to have to worry about somebody like, Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, who's going to, sneak it in at the 1 or 2 yard line. They take care of Lamar, and they don't want him getting beat up.
It's a perfect scenario because the threat of Lamar's speed is enough that he kind of hesitates the defense just enough to open up the hole, but he's not actually going to keep the ball. So yeah, I super love that. Let's go to tier 3 and a player that you really love talking about, Fitz, and that's Devon Achane. We answered a quick keeper question about him in the last segment. He's ranked RB11 here right now. And again, I kind of alluded to this, but like if you get it right with Achane, you're winning your league. Like that's what the upside is.
Yeah, so I've got him ranked RB7 right now. I mean, I've got him ranked ahead of Kyren Williams, which is probably a minority opinion among rankers. But I think what we saw is last year is a pretty good indication of what Achane is going to be for the entirety of his career. Like, not only does he have this game-breaking speed, like track speed. He was on the track team at Texas A&M. But I think the secret sauce with Achane is his contact balance. Like, he is so hard to, like, for a smaller back, he just bounces off of arm tackles. And sometimes you will see a defender hit him squarely, and it's almost like he is inside a pinball machine where he like almost ricochets off in a different direction faster than he was going before he was hit. Like, he is a really tough dude to bring down, catches passes, and we are just scratching the surface, I think, of what he could do in Mike McDaniel's offense. I'm really excited about him.
Billy, are you trying to be aggressive in how you rank and draft Achane this year, or are you wary of the size and the potential injury stuff and the fact that it has been kind of a small sample size of this elite explosive runner?
This is one of the hardest players to rank this year in 2024, just because talent-wise, he has the ability to be the RB1 in fantasy, but from a team standpoint and opportunity standpoint, I have a little trepidation, and I'm a little concerned about the usage and his size of holding up to a massive amount of increase. But you have to keep in mind, they still have Raheem Mostert here. They drafted Jalen Wright, and that, I don't think that they're going to hand anybody the ball over 200 plus times. And I think that this is going to be distributed amongst all the backs. And so I've kind of been throwing, water on the fire here with Devon Achane. And I think that, he's superb talent. I mean, this is a guy that averaged 7.8 yards per carry, but in my opinion, it's unsustainable here inside the NFL, especially given his size. And I think even you increase his workload statistically, you have to, bring that number down. And when you work out the magic and the math just doesn't equate to where he's being drafted in drafts unless he maintains that efficiency on an increased workload, which I think is going to be hard to do. I do expect him to see an increase usage in the passing game. I think that he'll kind of take over that spot pretty easily. And we're seeing, definitely some opportunities there for him, but I do have a little hesitation with him as a full-time runner and not from, like I said, not from a talent standpoint, but more about opportunity and how much he's actually going to see the ball. We had Raheem Mostert in a career year last year, and he's not going away anytime soon either. And so I just have a little bit of hesitation when I'm pulling the trigger on him every time, but it's a guy that you have to own inside of drafts. And he's the guy that could absolutely beat you if you don't have some shares.
Fitz, another name in this tier, the last name in this tier is Kenneth Walker, somebody who, we love the talent of, and there, some managers were kind of scared off with the Zach Charbonnet addition in Seattle. By all accounts, like from what we saw last year, but especially so far from what we've heard at training camp, it really does sound like Walker is like very much solidifying himself as the guy in this backfield. I'm really excited about Walker this year. I think RB16 is like a bit too low. I haven't totally sat down and said who definitively needs to be behind him, but it feels like he should be closer to RB1 territory, given the talent, given the potential usage, and given the potential upgrade, at offensive coordinator and what we just could see out of this offense in general this year. What do you think about Walker?
Yeah, no running back has forced more missed tackles than Kenneth Walker since he came into the league 2 years ago. Like that speaks volumes about his talent. And I think maybe sometimes people forget that when he came into the league, he was considered almost the equal of Breece Hall as a prospect. He'd had this great final season at Michigan State where he ran for 1,600 yards, scored 19 touchdowns. Maybe the only knock on him coming out of college that was that he hadn't shown much as a pass catcher, but that was probably more about the Spartans offense than it was about Walker himself. I get the hesitation because of the presence of Zach Charbonnet, because Charbonnet was a second-round pick. But in games they played together last year, Walker averaged 15.7 touches a game, Charbonnet 7.4 touches a game. So Seattle's kind of made its choice. They do have a new play caller now, and I know maybe the balance could shift a little bit. I've also heard people worried that Seattle might throw more with Ryan Grubb as the offensive coordinator, although Seattle already had the 5th highest pass rate in the league last year. So I don't know how much more they could throw than they did last year. I just think this is a really talented guy whose best seasons are still ahead of him. And this is a guy who still has averaged 80 yards from scrimmage a game over his first 2 seasons with 9 touchdowns in each of those seasons. So he's already given us some pretty good years. And I think there's still meat on the bone.
Billy, I wanted to ask you with Walker. So he's ranked RB 16 right now. 2 of the names that you highlighted that you wanted to bring up are Joe Mixon at RB 15 and Alvin Kamara, who's at the top of tier 4 at RB 17. So kind of these 3 guys who are back to back in the expert consensus rankings, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara, how are you parsing between those 3?
Yeah, I have a pretty big tier break between Joe Mixon and these guys. I got Kamara at RB 14, Joe Mixon RB 9, and then I have Kenneth Walker here at RB 15. So I do have these 2 closer, but Mixon to me just in a much better situation. Gets an offensive line upgrade in my opinion. The Texans were pretty plagued by injury last year at the line, but I do think they have the potential to be elite if they're fully healthy this year. I mean, Tunsil's one of the best top left tackles in the league, and you have Mason and Howard, who are also reliable on the right side. So this is a team that we know is going to be a powerhouse as well. Joe Mixon here is a back that can do it all. He's a guy that's going to get catches. He's a guy that's going to run, and there's a lot of targets to be distributed in this offense. This is actually the hardest offense to project, in my opinion, of football right now, is the Houston Texans and how they're going to distribute all these touches. But I do think that Mixon's in a pretty safe spot to be in a RB1 conversation. I mean, last year 6.7 defenders in the box. And I think that he was inefficient last year, and I think we're going to see those efficiencies increase here in 2024. Talking about Walker, I think he's probably in line with where his ADP is going at right now, and I agree with Pat. I think that it's pretty clear that he's the lead back over Zach Charbonnet, and Zach Charbonnet is the change of pace guy. And I do think that the offensive coordinator position, Ryan Grubb, I think the passing mix, I should say, is going to help the run game, and it's going to just open up the box a little bit more.
So the next name that you kind of wanted to talk about, Billy, is Rhamondre Stevenson. And I'll give you a break because I just asked you about 3 players in a row. So Fitz, before we get to Billy's opinion, what do you think of Rhamondre Stevenson?
I haven't been getting a lot of him lately. I'm a little worried about that offensive line, which could be one of the worst in the league. And I'm worried that the Patriots aren't going to put a lot of points on the board this year. I like the player. I mean, I am always a sucker for the dancing rhino types who, the big guys who can bowl you over and have really quick feet. So I love the type. And I mean, I have been overweight on Rhamondre in drafts the last couple of years, but this year I've been a little more cautious.
All right, Billy, now that you've had a chance to catch your breath, what do you think about Rhamondre?
Yeah, I just like it as it breaks down necessity. I mean, this is a guy that is going to be involved in the passing game, going to be involved in the ground. I think, to Pat's point, they are going to be bad. I think the line's going to be bad, and it's not going to help him on the ground, but they're going to have to use him in the passing game. And this is a guy that can catch 50 plus balls, I think. And you look at the receiving core, it's questionable at best. You look at the tight end core, and outside of Hunter Henry, it gets shaky as well. And so I think that this is somebody that's going to be on the field a lot. I mean, we're probably talking about snap share in the 80% range, potentially 75% range. And when they get down to the red zone, he's probably going to be the go-to guy. And I think that just at a pure necessity and like math, I think he's going to have to perform based upon the volume we're going to see. He may not be that efficient, but this is kind of like a going back to last year, looking at Rachaad White, when we saw how inefficient he was, but out of necessity, they had to use him. And I think we're looking at a similar usage here in 2024 for Rhamondre Stevenson.
To Billy's point, Ezekiel Elliott, as people may recall, was PPR gold when he was forced to play a lot for the Patriots last year. And maybe we see the same thing with Rhamondre.
I want to take a quick second to tell everybody about Draft Intel, the secret weapon you need to dominate your league. You can get it for free by syncing your league today at fantasypros.com/intel. It provides a deep dive into your league mates' drafting history, showing their patterns, tendencies, draft strategies, and more. Want to know who always drafts rookies too early or who reaches for homer picks? Draft Intel will tell you. Best of all, if you're a premium member, you can even mock draft against your league's intel. Make Draft Intel your secret weapon and begin dominating your league today at fantasypros.com/intel. All right, guys, let's wrap up by skipping ahead to tier 6. There's a couple names here that you highlighted, Fitz. We're going to start with Jaleel McLaughlin. He's down at RB49 in ECR. And we talked a bit about Javonte in the last segment. It's a really interesting backfield to examine because if Sean Payton does have a favorite in this backfield, that player will be a value in fantasy drafts this summer. Like just based on where these guys are going, if there is a kind of a clear back in here, and even if it's not a clear back, the way he might use Jaleel McLaughlin, and we have Debro in the waiting room to come on next segment, I'm sure he would love to talk about McLaughlin too, given his love for him. But I say all that to say that this is someone that could end up being a pretty nice value, especially with as cheaply as he's going.
Yeah, Debro is back there like a caged animal, not being able to wax poetic about Jaleel McLaughlin, like not being on this segment. So I guess I'll have to pinch hit for Debro in that regard. If I don't get Javonte Williams in my drafts, like I want to come out of it with Jaleel McLaughlin, because all those running back targets, and there are going to be a ton of them, 153 RB targets for the Broncos last year. A long history of Sean Payton offenses peppering the running backs with targets when it was Drew Brees running the show in New Orleans. And Bo Nix has been a screen and check down machine throughout his college career. Jaleel's going to get in on that, and they like him a lot. And Sean Payton has consistently talked McLaughlin up, not only as a player, but like as far as his work ethic and being a guy who's at the facility early and always looking to get better. And this guy is explosive. Like, I think he's going to be the number 2. I think he's going to get in on this target bonanza. And he had 31 catches last year. Maybe he could get 50 plus this year.
Billy, what are you doing with this backfield overall?
I'm nodding in agreement with Pat right now. This is a guy that if given more opportunity, he could potentially be inside the top 37, 38, the position. I have him at RB42 right now, slightly ahead of consensus, but he was RB9 in fantasy points per opportunity. The problem is he just didn't see a lot of opportunity. And so I think we are going to see him get a crack at it more here in 2024. To Pat's point, they've been talking him up. First to practice, last to leave, putting in the effort, and you mentioned here at the top of the segment that if we can find a back that Sean Payton likes, he's going to pay off dividends in fantasy. And right now, this seems to be that the arrow is pointing to Jaleel McLaughlin. This is a guy that is also electric on the ground. He was, RB 13 in breakaway run rate. He was RB6 in juke rate, true yards per carry, RB4 at 5.1. This is a guy I'm attacking pretty aggressively inside of draft rooms, and his ADP has been rising as of late. But it was very nice when he was going, outside the top 50th position. But he's one of my most owned backs, especially when I'm building 0 RB teams.
This just in from Debro. Jaleel is king, is what he's saying. So we know how he feels. This whole tier, I'm not going to read through every name because it's a very large tier, but there's a lot of rookies that I really like here. There's a lot of sleepers I really like here. Ray Davis is in this tier. Blake Corum is in this tier. Rico Dowdle, obviously not a rookie, but he's in this tier. Jaleel McLaughlin, of course. J.K. Dobbins, I love at cost this year. There's just a lot of really interesting names kind of in this range. So this is a range where I want to be drafting running backs. Fitz, you did highlight Corum as somebody that you wanted to touch on. We talked a little bit about Kyren Williams earlier. Corum, obviously, the other side of that coin. In the Rams backfield, I like Corum quite a bit as well. He's RB41, both in rankings and ADP. Is he somebody you're trying to be aggressive with?
Yes, he is the lottery ticket you want in your pocket, because if he does pay off, the payoff could be enormous. We've seen Sean Payton running backs have these monstrous seasons, and no one expected Kyren Williams to do what he did last year. But Kyren also missed time. He is a small guy. I know they're listing him now at 202 pounds. I really doubt he's north of 200 pounds. They drafted Blake Corum as early as they did for a reason. I don't think they want to give Kyren Williams 21 touches a game the way they did last year. So Corum's maybe going to have a fantasy relevant role independent of Kyren's health. But if anything happened to Kyren, I mean, you're going to see a bonanza similar to what we saw with Kyren last year with Corum.
Billy, is Corum one of the guys that you're targeting in this range? I mean, if you're looking at like a true handcuff, maybe it's more Tyler Algier, but does Corum kind of fall into that category for you?
Built, if you've seen him, I mean, he's just massive, and I think that they're going to start using him early and often inside of this rushing attack. It was pretty clear that Kyren wasn't able to hold up to the workload that he was given last year. He started breaking down, and he was very efficient and was able to do a lot with those touches. But I don't think they're going to give him that type of workload here again in 2024. So Blake Corum is definitely a handcuff I'm attacking in drafts.
Let's jump into a couple of audience questions here before we wrap up. And one of the questions that we did get was Jonathan Brooks, Blake Corum, and Trey Benson. How would you rank them in a dynasty win now mode? Fitz, who are you taking if you're win now in dynasty with those three?
I have to go with Brooks first. I mean, Brooks is, if it all hits with Brooks, like he is probably the most talented back in this class. But I do think Corum is the best pure runner in this class. And the way Benson has had a little bit of trouble getting traction in Cardinals training camp, I think I've now got Corum ahead of Benson.
What do you think, Billy?
Yeah, I agree. I think Brooks has the most upside, especially given the other running backs around him. The injury has me a little concerned to start the season, but this is the kind of guy that could have a monster second half of the season and really help you win down the playoffs. So I would agree with Pat here. I'm going to take Brooks, and then I agree. I have Corum ahead of Benson as well. It is close, but I think that Corum gets a slight nod for me.
Let's quickly answer two more audience questions here, then we'll wrap up. Jennifer Boland asks, Ayuk or Evans this year? And obviously there's a degree of uncertainty still with Ayuk. What do you think, Billy?
Well, you know that Ayuk is signing with the Steelers, and then he's going to sign with the Niners, and then he's going to sign with the Steelers, and it's a never-ending saga. So I think that regardless of the situation, I think I'd take Ayuk on both teams over Evans this year. I think that if he's in the Niners, we're going to see a lower target distribution again, probably in that 120 target range, which is not great for a wide receiver one, but he's going to be efficient with those targets. Where if he goes to Pittsburgh, I think he sees an increase in targets but a decrease in efficiency, so it's kind of a wash for me, and I think I'd still rank him around the same.
Fitz, Ayuk or Evans?
I've got Evans ranked higher. 1,000 yard season, wash, rinse, repeat. And like Ayuk only had 106 targets last year. I don't see a way for him, barring some major injury to one of the other components of that offense, for him to significantly bump that target total. And like he was maxed out on efficiency last year as far as yards per catch, yards per target, yards per route run. It's going to be hard for him to top that, those numbers from last year. So I think Evans is a little bit safer.
I'm actually going to skip this last question here, and we're going to talk about the next segment where we're talking about wide receivers anyway. We are going to be back here in just a minute with D-Row to talk some wide receiver rankings and tiers. Billy, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I hope we can make this an annual segment here with the three of us talking whatever it is that we decide to talk about. But I appreciate you making the time during a busy season.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, gentlemen. Always appreciate the invite and love talking football with you.